All right, we are on our last learning target of the simplifying unit, and that is taking a look at squaring and square roots. So our first example is taking a look at squaring fractions. And what's really nice about squaring fractions is that you don't have to worry about the fact that it's a fraction. You just distribute the square to the numerator and the denominator, and you're really just squaring regular numbers. So 3 squared is 9, 5 squared is 25. Let's take a look at one more. Same thing, distributing our square. 9 squared is 81, and 4 squared is 16. It's that simple. Next, we're going to take a look at squaring decimals, which isn't quite as simple as squaring fractions. Remember what it means to square something. It means to multiply it by itself. So we have 8 tenths times 8 tenths. So thinking about this with number sense, first of all, a negative times a negative is positive. So anytime you square something, your answer will be positive. And then 8 times 8 is 64, so we just need to figure out where does our decimal place go. Well, let's think about this with number sense. When you multiply by a decimal, your answer gets smaller. So if my original number was 8 tenths, my answer needs to be smaller than that, so my decimal point goes in front of the 6. Another way to think about it is to think about one of your numbers as a percent. So let's say we are trying to find 80% of 80 cents. Well, again, when you are taking a percent and it's less than 100, your number gets smaller. So 80% of 80 cents is 64 cents. Let's take a look at another one. Again, we're multiplying it by itself. So this one, since there's 2 place values, we could think back to last week and use the distributive property or the box method to solve this one. So distributing 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 tenths is 2 tenths. 2 tenths times 1 is 2 tenths. So really the only one that's challenging us mentally is going to be this 2 tenths times 2 tenths. So it's got to be smaller than the number we started with. I know that 2 times 2 is 4. But if I put the decimal point here, that's 40 cents, which is bigger than the 20 cents I started with. So I need to move the decimal place 1 more to the left. And another way to think about it, using percents, 20% of 2 tenths, or 20% of 20 cents, again, has to be smaller than the 20 cents I started with. So combining all my terms together, I've got one whole number. 2 tenths plus 2 tenths is 4 tenths, and then that extra 4 cents. Another way to think about this one is 12. 12 squared. Hopefully you have your multiplication chart memorized up to the 12s. 12 squared is 144, so then you need to figure out where to put your decimal point. Well, if you're multiplying 1.2 by itself, you're multiplying a number a little bit bigger than 1 by a number a little bit bigger than 1, so your answer shouldn't be that much bigger than 1. So again, if we put the decimal point there, getting an answer of 14 doesn't make sense. We want our number to be a little bit bigger than 1. Word problem. So Ellen's painting squares to make a mosaic. Each square is 7 tenths of a centimeter. What area does she need to paint? Remember, to find the area of a square, you take sides squared. So we've got 7 tenths squared. 7 times 7 is 49. So now we need to think about where to put the decimal point. I'm multiplying by a number smaller than 1, so my answer has to be smaller than the number I started with. So I'm going to put the decimal in front of the 4. And I'm going to label my answer. All right. We've got one more slide, so I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. We might be a little bit longer than 5 minutes on this video. And we're looking at simplifying square roots. Now, these square roots aren't our perfect squares that we have memorized on our multiplication chart, but they do remind us of them. 49. We just saw that 7 times 7 is 49, so the square root of 49 is 7. And anytime you have a number with an even number of zeros, it's a perfect square. And when you take the square root, you just cut the zeros in half. So thinking about checking our answer, if I had 70 squared, or 70 times 70, I would take my 7 times 7, which gives me the 49, and I would add 1 0 for each of the ones I have in my question. I've got a 0 on each 70, so I'd have 2 zeros on my answer. For fractions are actually the easiest ones to work with thus far. You just take the square root of the numerator. Square root of 64 is 8, because 8 times 8 is 64. And the square root of the denominator. Square root of 9 is 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. And lastly, square root of a decimal. So what you want to think about is, think about it without the decimal point first. What's the square root of 121? Square root of 121 is 11. Now we need to think about where to put our decimal point. Let's think about if we had 0.11 and we multiplied it by itself. We should get an answer smaller than we started with because both of those numbers are smaller than 1. So that answer would actually be this. So that doesn't make sense. So think about if we had the decimal point in between the two ones. A number a little bit bigger than 1 times a number a little bit bigger than 1 should give us an answer a little bit bigger than 1. So that is the one that makes sense. And here are your you try problems.